Comma splices. Just like sentence fragments, comma splices are considered to be huge correctness errors, so it's important that you can identify them and then fix them. A comma splice occurs when a comma is the only thing that separates two independent clauses. Said a different way, a comma splice is when a writer incorrectly uses only a comma between two independent clauses. Here are some examples that will help you to understand. She is studying for a math test, comma, she feels nervous about it. His solution will not improve student education, comma, the budget underfunds the school system. He is overly sarcastic, comma, his comments lose their power because of his tone. There are 3 easy ways to fix a comma splice situation. Number 1, change the current comma to a semicolon. If you like the idea of keeping these 2 main clauses in the same sentence so that the ideas are back-to-back for your reader, this is a great option. She is studying for a math test, semicolon. She feels nervous about it. His solution will not improve student education, semicolon. The budget underfunds the school system. He is overly sarcastic, semicolon. His comments lose their power because of his tone. Solution number 2. Add a conjunction after the comma that separates the 2 clauses. This way you can demonstrate a relationship between the 2 ideas and guide your reader more directly. She is studying for a math test, comma, but she feels nervous about it. His solution will not improve student education, comma, as the budget underfunds the school system. He is overly sarcastic, comma, and his comments lose their power because of his tone. Solution number 3. Use a period instead of a comma to create 2 separate standalone sentences. Just be sure to capitalize the first letter of the newly created sentence. Do you see how easy it is to fix a comma splice? It's really a matter of recognizing that one exists, and then you can easily correct it. If you see a comma in your sentence, you have to be sure that you don't have independent clauses on both sides without a conjunction. I know that this error may not seem like a big deal at all. Who cares, right? I get that, but still, comma splices are really frowned upon in academic writing, and the red ink will start flying if you don't correct them before you submit your essay. We'll do another round of quick practice. 2 of the 3 sentences I'm about to show you are examples of comma splices. Identify these, and then consider the 3 ways that you could correct each one. Here we go. These were our 2 comma splice offenders. Each example contains 2 independent clauses that are only joined by a comma, a big no-no. Here's our first one. Fall is my favorite season, comma, I enjoy the cooling weather and the reduced number of bugs outside. Our issue occurs with the comma right after the word season, so we can change the comma to a semicolon, or we can keep the comma and add an appropriate conjunction immediately after it, to connect the 2 independent clauses and to guide the reader into the second independent clause. Finally, we could make these 2 into their own separate sentences, capitalizing the first word of the second independent clause. The second comma splice from the bunch was this one. The symphony always plays on the 4th of July, comma, fireworks accompany their music. Just as before, we can switch to a semicolon, we can add a conjunction, or we can create 2 separate sentences. If we use a conjunction, it can't just be any conjunction. The because we used in our last example wouldn't work here at all. The symphony definitely doesn't play because the fireworks occur. They play because of the specific holiday, and additionally, there is also a fireworks show. But what about the third example that wasn't a comma splice, that was actually correct? Why wasn't it a comma splice example? It certainly had a comma within the sentence. We agree that learning about commas is not exciting, although it is really important. Note that we do have two separate subjects and predicates in each part of the sentence, but that word although is a special subordinating one. It keeps the second clause from being independent, and it's totally fine for a dependent clause to come at the beginning of the sentence with a comma after it, or, as in this case, for it to be placed at the end of the sentence, set apart by a comma. This one is totally correct as it already is. Before we close out, I'm going to throw in one more common no-no that is directly related to sentence fragments and comma splices. Consider this a quick bonus. Fused sentences. A fused sentence incorrectly joins two independent clauses without using any punctuation in between. It's basically a comma splice without the comma. She is studying for a math test. She feels nervous about it. This reflects really poorly on the writer, as using punctuation between two independent clauses is a big part of English grammar. Plus, it also makes that sentence confusing and a puzzle for readers to have to decode. It discredits the writer because he or she has lost complete control of the sentence, and it's kind of shocking that this blatant error wasn't identified in the editing process. We as writers use punctuation to easily guide readers through our ideas. We don't want them to have to sort out where one idea stops and another begins. Cue the examples. The law was passed in 2013. The Supreme Court found it to be in violation in 2014. Smith says Americans are wasteful with their water consumption. There are ways to lower daily use. I bet you already know what to do. We're back to our old semicolon, comma plus conjunction, or two separate sentences approaches. We can insert a semicolon in between the two independent clauses. We can add a comma and a conjunction. Gotta have that conjunction, as a comma alone would create a comma splice situation. Or we can add a period after the first independent clause and then capitalize the first letter of the second independent clause. Any of these would be correct. Here are those same three fixes being implemented on our second example. Semicolon, comma plus conjunction, two separate sentences. Note, just because you have these options doesn't mean that they are all equally good options. It's really going to depend on how you want your reader to engage with the information and what feels most natural to read. I'm just telling you that you will avoid having a catastrophic correctness error no matter which option you pick, and your sentence will technically be grammatically correct. For most of these examples that we've reviewed, I'd go with the comma and conjunction option, as it makes for smoother reading and creates an intended direction for the reader, connecting ideas with an and, or turning in a different direction with a but. So let's finish up by looking at three side-by-side examples of the errors we discussed in this lesson: sentence fragments, comma splices, and fused sentences. Can you name the type of error that you see in each one? This first one is a fused sentence because there are two independent clauses that are joined with nothing, no comma, which would be a comma splice, no period, no conjunction. It's really out of control and looks bad, like the writer isn't aware of the elements that are included. This one isn't a sentence at all, right? We have this subordinating word because at the beginning, which creates a dependent element. It can't stand alone, and it's a sentence fragment. Here's a classic comma splice. We've got two independent clauses that could stand alone as their own sentences, but they are linked with only a comma, which we know is a big no-no in academic and business English. And how are you going to fix each of these? You've got options, so there's no one right answer. Here's how I fixed these. She enjoys snowboarding in the winter, but she has always wanted to try surfing. Because his dad owns a climbing gym near the school, he gets to climb frequently. I swim laps 2 or 3 times each week, and it has helped me to gain lean muscle mass quickly. Now that you've seen examples of these common errors and how to fix them, isn't it maybe a little surprising that students struggle so mightily with this? If they just understood, like you do now, what is considered an error and how to make simple corrections, I'm certain that student essay grades would improve. When your essay is being evaluated, you want your professor's attention to be on your argument. If your professor thinks, "Yikes, that's a comma splice," or "Wow, that sentence structure was all jumbled up," then he or she has been distracted from the point you were making in your essay. We worry about correctness because we want our writing to be clear, straightforward, and noticed for its ideas. And trust me, when you remove these types of errors from your essays, your ideas will totally take center stage. Great job at staying with me here. You're really doing well.